I'm Megan, 35, and I never thought I'd be sitting in a hotel room watching my sister-in-law Stephanie and her husband Richard breaking into my house on a security feed. My hands are shaking as I recognize the familiar faces illuminated in night vision green, methodically picking the lock on my back door. The inheritance my late husband James left me has torn this family apart, but I never imagined it would come to this. I gasp as I watch them head straight to my home office, pulling out drawers and rifling through my personal documents. What they don't know is about to change everything. Before I dive into this wild story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. If you've ever dealt with family drama over money, hit that like button and subscribe to hear how I caught my in-laws red-handed in the most satisfying way possible. Trust me, you'll want to stick around for this one. 8 months ago, my world shattered when James died in a car accident. One minute we were planning our 10th anniversary trip, and the next I was planning his funeral. James and I had built a beautiful life together. We ran a successful interior design business, had just finished renovating our dream home, and were discussing starting a family. All those dreams vanished in an instant on a rainy Tuesday evening when a drunk driver crossed the median. Before James died, I had what I thought was a great relationship with his sister Stephanie and her husband Richard. We spent holidays together, went on double dates, and even vacationed together every summer at James's family cabin on Lake Michigan. The property had been in the family for generations, passed down from James's grandfather. It wasn't just a vacation home, it was where James proposed to me, where we celebrated countless milestones, and where he told me he wanted to raise our children someday. The first Thanksgiving after James's death was when I noticed the shift. I was already struggling to make it through the holidays without him, and Stephanie's behavior seemed off. She kept making comments about family heirlooms and asked pointed questions about what would happen to James's things now that he was gone. Richard was unusually quiet, watching me closely throughout the dinner. 2 weeks later came the reading of the will. James had updated it just a year before his death, making me the primary beneficiary of his estate. This included his share of our business, our home, his investments, and, most controversially, full ownership of the family lake cabin. James had specifically written that he wanted me to have the cabin because he knew how much it meant to us and our future plans. The moment the lawyer mentioned the cabin, I saw Stephanie's face transform. Her mouth tightened into a thin line, and she gripped Richard's hand so hard her knuckles turned white. When the reading finished, she approached me in the parking lot. James would have wanted that cabin to stay with blood family, she said, her voice trembling with barely contained rage. He obviously wasn't thinking clearly when he made that will. I was too shocked and grief-stricken to respond properly. Steph, he wanted me to have it. We can still use it together as a family, just like always. You're not really family anymore, are you? She shot back before Richard pulled her away to their car. That comment stung worse than anything else she could have said. Not family? James was the love of my life, my partner for 12 years. How could I suddenly not be family? The next few weeks brought a stream of texts from Stephanie about family legacy and how I needed to do the right thing by signing the cabin over to her. I tried explaining that I wanted to honor James's wishes, that the cabin held precious memories for me too, but she wouldn't hear it. At Christmas, things escalated. James's parents hosted dinner, and I arrived with my usual dish, James's favorite sweet potato casserole. The conversation stopped abruptly when I walked in. I could feel eyes following me as I set the dish down and took my seat. The same seat I'd occupied for over a decade of family gatherings. Midway through dinner, after several glasses of wine, Stephanie cleared her throat. I think we need to discuss the elephant in the room. The cabin. All eyes turned to me. Stephanie, maybe this isn't the best time, James's mother Barbara said gently. But Stephanie continued. Mom, it's not fair. That cabin has been in our family for generations. James would never have wanted it to leave the family. She must have manipulated him into changing the will. The accusation hung in the air like poison. I looked around the table, hoping someone would defend me, but everyone seemed to be studying their plates. Even Barbara, who had hugged me tightly when I arrived, wouldn't meet my eyes. That's not true, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. James and I talked about it. He wanted me to have it because of our memories there, and because. I choked up, unable to finish. Because we had planned to start trying for a baby, and he wanted our child to grow up loving that place as much as he had. Because what? Richard interjected, speaking up for the first time. Because you convinced him his own sister didn't deserve it? You had him for 12 years. We've been part of his life for 34 years. You can't possibly think you deserve that cabin more than Stephanie does. I set down my fork, appetite gone. James made his choice. I'm respecting his wishes. The cabin isn't for sale or transfer. I left early that night, and as I drove home alone, I realized the battle lines had been drawn. What I didn't know then was just how dirty this fight was about to get. By February, 2 months after James's death, I was drowning. Grief counseling helped somewhat, but the constant barrage from Stephanie was wearing me down. On top of managing my emotional state, I was now running our business alone, handling paperwork for James's estate, and trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy. The text messages from Stephanie evolved from guilt trips to outright hostility. "You're stealing from us," one read. "James would be ashamed of you," said another. I started dreading my phone's notification sound. One particularly difficult day, I received a call from Barbara, my mother-in-law. Her voice was cold, formal, nothing like the warm woman who had once told me she was grateful James had found me. "I thought we raised you better than this," she began without preamble. "What are you talking about?" I asked, genuinely confused. "Stephanie told us everything about your affairs during the marriage." Her voice cracked. "How could you, Megan? While my son was working so hard to provide for you?" The accusation hit me like a physical blow. Affairs? I had never been unfaithful to James, not once in our entire relationship. "Barbara, that's absolutely not true. I never—" "Save it," she interrupted. "Stephanie showed us the messages, from your personal accounts. James knew, didn't he? That's why he was so distant those last few months. And now you have the audacity to take his legacy too." My mind raced. Messages? What messages? James and I had been perfectly happy before his death. There had been no distance, no affairs, no messages. "Barbara, please listen to me. Whatever Stephanie showed you, it's not real. I never cheated on James. I loved him completely. We think it's best if you don't attend Sunday dinner anymore," she said, ignoring my protests. "This family has been through enough." After she hung up, I sat in shocked silence for nearly an hour. My phone buzzed with a text from Michael, James's younger brother. "How could you do that to him?" The systematic isolation had begun. Whatever Stephanie had told the family, they believed her over me. The following week, I received an invitation to my niece's birthday party, James's brother Michael's daughter. I'd been present at her birth, was named her godmother. Hours after receiving the invitation, Michael's wife Laura called. "I'm so sorry, Megan," she said, sounding genuinely distressed. "Michael thinks it's better if you don't come. For the sake of family harmony." "Because of what Stephanie said?" "Laura, none of it is true. I would never have hurt James like that." "I know," she whispered. "But right now everyone's emotions are high. Give it time." But time only made things worse. Anonymous calls began coming to my phone at all hours. I'd answer to silence, heavy breathing, or sometimes just a whispered thief before they hung up. My business email was flooded with cancellations from clients who had mysteriously heard concerning things about my professionalism. One night, arriving home late from a rare client meeting, I noticed my mailbox was open and empty. I was expecting important insurance documents that never arrived. The next day, the plants on my front porch had been knocked over, soil scattered across my welcome mat. Nothing concrete enough to call the police, but the message was clear. I wasn't safe. The final straw came 3 weeks after Barbara's call. I walked out to my car one morning to find the word "Give it back" scratched deep into the hood's paint, the jagged letters spanning the entire length. My hands trembled as I took photos, finally calling the police to file a report. The officer who responded was sympathetic but not particularly helpful. "Family disputes can get ugly," he said, writing down minimal notes. "Any proof it was your sister-in-law?" I didn't have proof, not yet. But in that moment, standing in my driveway looking at my vandalized car, something hardened inside me. The grief that had been keeping me passive began to transform into determination. If they wanted a fight over what James had legally and lovingly left to me, they were going to get one. March brought more than spring showers. It brought a formal letter from Anderson and Wright, attorneys at law. Richard, who worked at a competing firm, had apparently enlisted colleagues to help their cause. The letter formally contested James's will, citing undue influence and mental incapacity at the time of its creation. I immediately called my own attorney, Helen Matthews, who had handled our business contracts for years and helped James update his will. "This is frivolous," Helen assured me after reviewing the letter. James was of completely sound mind. I personally witnessed him sign the updated will, and we had 2 other witnesses plus a notary. There was absolutely no question of his capacity. "What about the undue influence claim?" I asked, my stomach nodding. "Equally ridiculous. James was adamant about his wishes." In fact, she hesitated. "In fact what?" "I probably shouldn't tell you this, but James specifically mentioned that Stephanie might contest the will. He told me, 'My sister has always felt entitled to family property. Make sure this is ironclad for Megan's sake.' That's partly why we were so thorough with the documentation." That knowledge brought both comfort and fresh pain. James had anticipated this conflict and tried to protect me even after he was gone. I wished he was here now to help me navigate the storm his prediction had unleashed. Helen promised to handle the legal response, but warned me the process could be lengthy and stressful. "They're hoping you'll give in just to make it stop. Don't make any decisions out of exhaustion or fear." Fear was certainly becoming a daily companion. I started checking my locks repeatedly before bed, jumping at unexpected noises, keeping lights on throughout the night. Sleep became elusive, and when it did come, nightmares of break-ins and confrontations jolted me awake. My one remaining comfort was my friendship with Amy Chen, who had been my college roommate and stood beside me at my wedding. When everyone else in my life seemed to be believing Stephanie's lies, Amy remained steadfast, or so I thought. We met for coffee at our usual spot, a quiet cafe halfway between our homes. Amy was already there when I arrived, fidgeting with her cup, not meeting my eyes. "What's wrong?" I asked, sliding into the booth. She pulled out her phone, hesitated, then turned it toward me. "Steph sent these to me yesterday. She's sending them to everyone." On the screen was what appeared to be an email from my account to an unknown man, with explicit content suggesting an ongoing affair. My name, my email address, but words I had never written. "Amy, that's not real," I said, my voice rising. "I never wrote that. Someone must have hacked my account or fabricated this completely." She pulled the phone back, scrolling to show more messages, even some apparent text exchanges with timestamps during periods when I had been with James. "There are dozens of these, Meg, with different men. She has screenshots of your Instagram DMs, too." "They're all fake," I insisted, feeling a cold sweat break out across my skin. "Amy, you know me. I loved James. I would never have done this to him." Amy's expression was pained. "I want to believe you. But why would Stephanie go to all this trouble? What does she gain by destroying your reputation if the will is ironclad anyway? Because she wants to break me. She wants me to give up and hand over the cabin out of sheer exhaustion." I reached across the table for her hand, but she subtly pulled back. "Look, I've known you for 15 years, but these look real, Megan. The timestamps, the way you write. And there are things in these messages about your marriage problems that only you would know." My blood ran cold. I had confided in Amy about occasional disagreements with James, normal marriage stuff that we always worked through. Nothing serious, nothing that would ever lead to infidelity. But if those private details were woven into fake messages, "Amy, someone has accessed my accounts." These are elaborate fakes meant to isolate me. You're the only friend I have left right now. Please don't let them take you too." She gathered her things, looking torn. "I need some time, Meg. This is a lot to process." As she left, my phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "You should check your email," said a digitally altered voice before hanging up. With shaking hands, I opened my email to find a message from James's mother. The subject line, "Never contact us again." The body contained just one sentence. "After seeing what Stephanie showed us today, we want nothing more to do with the woman who destroyed our son's final years." I broke down in the cafe, sobbing uncontrollably until the concerned manager helped me to my car. Driving home through tears, I realized I was completely alone now. My in-laws believed I had betrayed their son. My friends were abandoning me one by one. Even my business was suffering as clients canceled after mysterious calls informing them about my supposed unethical behavior. That night, lying awake in my empty house, jumping at every creak and gust of wind, I made a decision. If I couldn't fight their smear campaign, I could at least protect myself and gather evidence. First thing tomorrow, I would look into security systems. The next morning, I researched home security systems extensively, comparing features and reviews. I needed something comprehensive: cameras covering all entry points, motion sensors, immediate alerts, and high-quality recording capabilities. Money wasn't an object. My safety and sanity were worth every penny. I settled on Guardian Home Security, scheduling an installation appointment for the very next day. The representative who arrived, Kevin, was professional and thorough, never questioning why a woman living alone in a safe neighborhood needed such an extensive setup. "We'll place cameras here, here, and here," he explained, marking spots on a diagram of my home. "They're discreet but have excellent night vision and audio pickup. Motion sensors on all doors and windows. Everything connects to this central hub, which sends immediate notifications to your phone if anything's detected when the system is armed." "And I can access the feeds remotely?" I asked. "From anywhere with internet connection. The app lets you view all cameras simultaneously or check each one individually. All footage is stored on our secure cloud for 30 days, and you can download any clips you want to save long-term." By sunset, my home was fortified. 4 exterior cameras covered every approach to the house. Interior cameras monitored the entryway, living room, kitchen, and my home office, the places most likely to be targeted. Kevin walked me through the app, showing me how to arm the system, check the feeds, and download footage. "Just remember," he said before leaving, "the best security system is the one no one knows you have. The visible deterrents will discourage random burglars. But if someone really wants to get in and knows you have cameras, they'll find ways to avoid them." His words gave me an idea. I would tell no one about my new security system. If Stephanie and Richard were behind the harassment, as I suspected, letting them believe I was unprotected might encourage them to make a mistake. I began documenting everything: the anonymous calls, the strange cars driving by my house, the social media posts Stephanie was making with thinly veiled references to me. One particularly vicious post read, "It's amazing how people show their true colors when money is involved. Some will betray those they claim to love most. Truth will come out, justice for James." The comment section was filled with sympathy for her and thinly veiled disgust for me, including remarks from mutual friends and even some of my clients. The public shaming campaign was working brilliantly. For everyone who knew us, she was the grieving sister, and I was the manipulative widow who had somehow tricked James and was now refusing to right this wrong. I was screenshotting this particular post when my phone rang. It was David Cooper, James's financial advisor and our friend for nearly a decade. He had helped us plan for our future, knew our finances intimately, and had been supportive after James's death. I felt a surge of relief at seeing his name. Finally, someone from our old life reaching out. "David, it's good to hear from you," I answered. "Megan, we need to talk," he said, his tone uncharacteristically serious. "Can you meet me at my office tomorrow? There are some concerns about James's accounts that we should discuss. What kind of concerns? I asked, immediately on alert. I'd rather not get into it over the phone. Just come by around 2, okay? The meeting was brief and devastating. David sat across from his immaculate desk, a folder between us that he hadn't yet opened. I've received some concerning information, he began, not quite meeting my eyes. Transfers from your joint accounts to your personal account in the months before James's death. Substantial amounts. What? There were no such transfers, I said, genuinely confused. James and I had maintained both joint accounts and separate personal accounts throughout our marriage, but we were always transparent about money. The records suggest otherwise, David said, finally opening the folder and sliding some printouts toward me. They showed what appeared to be transfers, $15,000 here, $20,000 there, from our joint business account to my personal account over a 6-month period. I studied the documents, my confusion turning to anger. These are forgeries. I never made these transfers. Our joint account didn't even have this much money in it at these times. We had just financed the business expansion. David's expression remained neutral. Stephanie and Richard brought these to my attention. They're concerned you were preparing for a separation before James's accident. The pieces suddenly clicked together. You've been talking to them? About my financial matters? David, that's completely unprofessional and probably illegal. He had the grace to look uncomfortable. They're family, Megan. They're concerned about James's legacy. I'm your client. James was your client. Not Stephanie, I said, gathering the forged documents. I'll be taking these to my lawyer and filing a complaint with the Financial Regulatory Board. And I'll be moving all my accounts immediately. Megan, be reasonable, David said, his professional demeanor cracking. The situation with the cabin has everyone upset. If you would just consider selling it and splitting the proceeds, all of this unpleasantness could go away. I stood up, clutching the fake documents. You too, David? After all these years? My voice cracked. Did Stephanie tell you I was having affairs too? Did you believe that? His silence was answer enough. Another person from my past life, gone. You're fired, I said simply, walking out of his office. That evening, as I was transferring my accounts to a new bank recommended by my attorney, I noticed an unfamiliar car drive by my house for the third time in an hour. Dark sedan, tinted windows. It slowed noticeably as it passed. I watched through the blinds, the security app open on my phone, exterior cameras tracking the vehicle's movement. I had just finished the banking transfers when my phone rang, unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Hello? We know what you did, Richard's voice, slightly slurred. You can't hide from us forever. The line went dead. I saved the voicemail and added it to my growing evidence file, then armed my security system and double-checked every lock before trying to sleep. 2 weeks later, I was at Riverside Coffee, my new remote working spot since the harassment had started. I'd chosen a corner table where I could see the entire cafe while keeping my back to the wall, a habit I'd developed recently. The place was busy enough to provide anonymity but quiet enough to work. I was deep in spreadsheets when familiar voices from the table behind me cut through my concentration. Stephanie's going crazy over this cabin situation. I froze, not turning around. It was Kimberly Watson, Stephanie's best friend since college. She was speaking to someone I couldn't see. I told her she needs to let it go. But Richard's just encouraging her, Kimberly continued. Now they've got this whole plan to find evidence at Megan's house. I kept my head down, straining to hear over the espresso machine's hiss. Evidence of what? Asked her companion. They think James wrote letters about changing his will back, or that Megan has the original will that she supposedly destroyed. Complete fantasy, if you ask me, but they're convinced it exists. That sounds illegal, the other person said. Oh, it definitely is, Kimberly agreed. Breaking and entering. Richard says they'll just say they were checking on her if they get caught. Family concern and all that. They know she leaves her back door unlocked sometimes. My mind raced. They were planning to break into my house? looking for documents that didn't exist? This was far beyond harassment and social media smear campaigns. When are they planning this? The friend asked. This weekend. Megan posted about visiting her parents in Ohio, so they know she'll be gone. I had indeed mentioned my upcoming trip on social media, a deliberate move to maintain the appearance of normalcy despite my increasing isolation. Now it seemed that transparency would work in my favor. I gathered my things silently and left without looking back, my heart pounding. Instead of going home, I drove straight to Helen's law office. They're planning to break in, I explained after being ushered into her office. I overheard the whole thing. Helen's expression grew serious as I related the conversation. This changes everything, Megan. We need to call the police. And tell them what? That I overheard someone saying my sister-in-law might break in at some undefined time? They already didn't take my vandalism report seriously. So what are you thinking? Helen asked, studying my face. I'm thinking I let them do it, I said, the plan forming as I spoke. I have a security system now, cameras everywhere, motion sensors, the works. If they break in, I'll have irrefutable evidence of their harassment. Enough to get a restraining order at minimum, maybe press charges. Helen frowned. That's risky. If they damage your property or plant something incriminating. They already think I've destroyed evidence. What more could they plant? And my security system would show them doing it. I strongly advise against this approach, Helen said. At least tell the police about your suspicions beforehand. We compromised. I would file a report documenting my concerns, but proceed with my trip as planned. The security system would be fully armed, and I would watch remotely. If Stephanie and Richard appeared, I would call the police immediately. The next few days were consumed with preparations. I made my trip plans very public, posting on social media about visiting my parents, even tagging myself at the airport on Friday morning. I carefully secured my important documents in a safe deposit box at my new bank, leaving nothing of value in my home office. Most crucially, I double-checked every aspect of my security system. All cameras working, motion sensors active, direct alert line to the security company established. I could monitor everything from my phone and had programmed one-touch emergency calling. I deliberately left certain things in place. Old files labeled James's business and personal documents filled with non-sensitive materials. Bait, essentially. And while I made a show of setting the visible alarm panel before leaving, I knew the entire system would be running silently, not displaying its active status on the control panels. To anyone entering, it would appear I had forgotten to arm it. Friday afternoon found me checked into a hotel 30 miles from my house, not at my parents' home in Ohio. My bags were unpacked, laptop set up on the desk, security app open and displaying multiple camera feeds on the screen. Now all I could do was wait. I ordered room service and tried to distract myself with TV, but my eyes kept returning to the security feeds. As evening fell and my house grew dark, I felt a strange mix of dread and anticipation. Would they actually go through with it? Part of me hoped they wouldn't, that they would come to their senses about how far they had gone down this destructive path. Another part desperately wanted concrete proof of what they had been doing to me these past months. At 9:43 p.m., my phone buzzed with an alert. Motion detected. Back door. My heart jumped into my throat as I switched to that camera feed. There they were, Stephanie and Richard, dressed in dark clothing, approaching my back door cautiously. Richard was carrying what looked like a small toolkit. Stephanie kept glancing over her shoulder nervously. I hit record on all cameras and watched as they began to pick the lock on my back door. The security feed showed Richard working methodically on my back door lock, while Stephanie kept watch, her nervous energy evident as she shifted from foot to foot. It took Richard nearly 5 minutes to pick the lock, 5 minutes during which I sat transfixed, watching these people I had once considered family preparing to violate my home. When the door finally swung open, they hesitated at the threshold. Richard pulled out his phone and activated the flashlight, keeping it pointed downward to minimize visibility from outside. Stephanie followed close behind, carefully closing the door after them. "Security system's not armed," Richard whispered, the audio crystal clear through my high-quality cameras. She really did forget. "Let's hurry," Stephanie replied, her voice tense. "Office first." They moved through my kitchen with surprising familiarity, avoiding the creaky floorboard near the refrigerator that even occasional guests wouldn't know about. Had they been in my house before without my knowledge? The thought sent a chill through me. The hallway camera captured them approaching my home office, both now wearing latex gloves. Richard tried the door, unlocked as I'd left it, and they slipped inside. I switched to the office camera feed. The night vision showed them in ghostly green as they immediately began searching. Richard went straight to the filing cabinet while Stephanie moved to my desk, pulling open drawers and rifling through folders. "It has to be here somewhere," Stephanie muttered, frustration evident in her voice. "The original will, or letters, or something we can use." "We don't even know what we're looking for exactly," Richard replied, his voice equally low. "Just anything that proves she manipulated him." "I need those papers more than she does," Stephanie said, her voice cracking slightly. "That cabin should have been mine. Dad always said it would be split between us." "I know, babe," Richard soothed, moving to a bookshelf and checking behind books. "That's why we're doing this. She doesn't deserve that property after what she did to James." The casual mention of my supposed betrayal of James made my blood boil. I had loved my husband completely. These people had fabricated an entire narrative about our marriage to justify their greed and resentment. After 20 minutes of increasingly frantic searching, Richard sat in my office chair, rubbing his face. "There's nothing here, Steph. If there was evidence, she's hidden it somewhere else." Stephanie slammed a drawer shut in frustration. "We need something. Anything. The lawyers say we don't have enough to contest the will successfully." Richard was silent for a moment, then reached into his jacket pocket. "Maybe we need to help the evidence along a bit." My breath caught as he pulled out a small envelope and removed what looked like letters. He placed them in the back of my desk drawer, carefully positioning them under some folders. "What are those?" Stephanie asked, moving closer. "Letters I wrote, made to look like they're from James," Richard explained, talking about how he was planning to change his will, how he felt pressured by Megan, dated just before the accident. Stephanie looked uncertain for the first time. "Isn't that forgery?" "Only if we claim he actually wrote them. We're just going to find them and suggest they raise questions about her influence. Besides," his voice hardened, "she's been manipulating everything else. This just levels the playing field." I was speechless with shock, watching them plant false evidence in my home. I immediately started downloading this footage, ensuring it was backed up to multiple places. As Richard closed the drawer, Stephanie moved around the desk to a shelf where I kept framed photos. She picked up one of James and me on our wedding day, studied it for a moment, then deliberately dropped it on the floor. The glass shattered loudly in the quiet house. "Steph," Richard hissed, "what are you doing?" "I hate seeing them together," she said, her voice cold. She never deserved him. She moved to another frame, a photo of James, me, Stephanie, and Richard at the lake cabin 2 summers ago, all of us smiling, arms around each other. She removed the photo from the broken frame and tore it in half, separating James and me. Something in me broke watching that simple act of malice. These people had been my family for 12 years. We had shared holidays, celebrated birthdays, comforted each other through hard times. Now Stephanie was destroying mementos of our shared history, while her husband planted false evidence in my home. Richard seemed uncomfortable with the destruction, but didn't stop her. "Let's check the bedroom. She might have a safe or something there." They left the office, and I switched camera views to follow their progress through my home. In the bedroom, they searched through my closet, under the bed, even checking air vents. Finding nothing, their frustration grew. "This was supposed to be easy," Stephanie complained. "Find the evidence, take photos, get out. Now what?" "Now we use what we planted," Richard said pragmatically. "I'll take photos of the letters before we go. It's not what we hoped for, but it might be enough to pressure her. They returned to the office, where Richard carefully extracted the forged letters, arranged them on the desk, and took several photos with his phone. Then he replaced them exactly as he had positioned them before. "Let's go," he said, checking his watch. "We've been here almost an hour." As they prepared to leave, Stephanie paused by my desk one last time. "I deserve that cabin more than she does," she whispered, almost to herself. "After everything she did to this family." I watched them exit through the back door, Richard carefully pulling it closed behind them. Only when their car pulled away from the curb did I release the breath I'd been holding for what felt like hours. My hands were shaking as I replayed key segments of footage, downloading everything to my phone and laptop, creating backup copies in cloud storage. I had them. Clear, indisputable evidence of breaking and entering, planting false evidence, and property destruction. I called Helen immediately, despite the late hour. "They did it," I said when she answered groggily. "I have everything on video. Breaking in, searching my house, planting fake letters, destroying property, all of it." "Are you safe?" she asked, suddenly alert. "I'm at the hotel still. They've left my house." "Good. Don't go back tonight. First thing tomorrow, we're taking this to the police. This isn't just harassment anymore, Megan. This is criminal activity." As I ended the call, I felt a strange mix of vindication and profound sadness. I had the evidence I needed to end their campaign against me, but at what cost? The family I had once been part of was irrevocably shattered. There would be no reconciliation after this, no return to holiday dinners and shared celebrations. James was gone, and with him, the bonds that had held us all together. I sat in my hotel room until dawn, watching the security feeds to ensure they didn't return, replaying the footage of their break-in, listening to Stephanie's bitter words again and again. By morning, grief had hardened into resolve. It was time to end this. I returned home earlier than I had publicly announced, meeting Helen in my driveway. We walked through the house together, documenting the damage, the broken photo frame, the torn photograph, the planted letters. Helen placed the forged documents in an evidence bag while I downloaded additional footage from the security system's cloud storage. "This is more than enough," Helen said, reviewing the video on her tablet. "Breaking and entering, destruction of property, attempted fraud with these forged letters. The audio is particularly damning. They clearly state their intentions." We drove together to the police station, where I filed a comprehensive report. Detective Rivera, a serious woman with compassionate eyes, reviewed the evidence carefully. "This is unusually clear documentation for a break-in," she commented, raising an eyebrow. "Most victims don't have multiple camera angles and audio. I installed the system because of escalating harassment," I explained, showing her my documented timeline of incidents. The vandalism to my car, the threatening calls, the social media attacks. "I suspected they might try something like this eventually." "And you deliberately let them break in?" she asked, not judgmental but clarifying. "I didn't encourage it," I corrected. "I heard they were planning it, so I made sure my security system was working properly. I was monitoring remotely and prepared to call 911 if anything went beyond what happened." Detective Rivera nodded slowly. "Well, you've certainly made our job easier. This is more than enough for arrest warrants. We'll need formal statements from both of you, and then we'll proceed with the arrests." The process took most of the day, giving statements, signing documents, answering endless questions about my relationship with Stephanie and Richard, explaining James's will and the disputes that followed. By late afternoon, Detective Rivera confirmed that officers had been dispatched to arrest both of them on multiple charges. "What happens now?" I asked Helen as we left the station. "They'll be processed, probably released on bail pending trial. We'll file for a restraining order immediately. With this evidence, no judge will deny it." She squeezed my arm reassuringly. "This is going to stop now, Megan. They've crossed a line they can't uncross." I returned home alone, emotionally drained but relieved that concrete action was finally being taken. The house felt different now that strangers had violated it, less like my sanctuary, more like just a structure. I found myself checking closets and behind doors, half expecting to find someone hiding there. As I was sweeping up the broken glass from the photo frame, my phone rang. Michael, James's brother. I hesitated, then answered. Megan? His voice was strained. Is it true? Did you have Stephanie and Richard arrested? Yes, I said simply. They broke into my house, Michael. I have it all on video. A long silence followed. I need to see you, he finally said. Can I come over? 20 minutes later, Michael sat at my kitchen table, watching the security footage on my laptop. His face grew increasingly pale as he watched his sister and brother-in-law picking my lock, searching my office, planting evidence, and destroying my property. When the video ended, he covered his face with his hands. I don't know what to say, he whispered. I knew Stephanie was upset about the cabin, but this is criminal. It's been going on for months, I told him, showing him my timeline of harassment. The social media posts, the vandalism, the rumors about affairs that never happened. They've been systematically trying to destroy me, Michael. And the worst part is, everyone believed them, even you. He couldn't meet my eyes. I didn't want to believe it, he admitted. But Stephanie was so convincing. She showed us messages, emails, said you had manipulated James into changing his will when he was vulnerable. All fakes, I said firmly. James and I were happy. He changed his will because he wanted to, not because I pressured him. Michael was quiet for a long moment. Then, there's something I need to tell you. His voice cracked. I knew they were planning to come here. The words hit me like a physical blow. What? Not the break-in specifically, he clarified quickly, but Stephanie told me they were going to look for evidence at your house. She said you had taken family heirlooms that belonged to our parents, that you were hiding documents proving James wanted to change his will back. And you believed her? I couldn't keep the hurt from my voice. I wanted to, he admitted, tears in his eyes. It was easier than accepting that James chose to leave you the cabin instead of keeping it in the family. I was angry too, Megan. Not as angry as Stephanie, but I felt like you were taking a piece of our childhood away. I never wanted to keep any of you from using the cabin, I said quietly. It was your home long before it was mine. I just wanted to honor James's wishes. Michael wiped his eyes. I know that now, watching this video, seeing what they were willing to do. He shook his head. I'm so sorry, Megan. I should have stood by you. James would be disgusted with all of us. His apology was both healing and painful. One person from my old life finally believed me, but the acknowledgement of how alone I'd been only highlighted how much I had lost. What happens now? Michael asked. They'll be charged. There will probably be a trial, unless they accept a plea deal. I'm filing for a restraining order. My phone buzzed with a text from Detective Rivera. Both subjects in custody. Richard Miller requesting to speak with detective in exchange for consideration. Calling you tomorrow with update. I showed Michael the message. Looks like Richard might be turning on Stephanie. Michael closed his eyes briefly. This is going to tear the family apart even more. The family was already torn apart, Michael, I said gently. The moment they decided I wasn't really part of it anymore. As Michael left, promising to speak with their parents, I felt the first glimmer of vindication. The truth was finally coming to light. But as I moved through my empty house, placing the torn photograph in a drawer because I couldn't bear to throw it away, I wondered if any victory could fill the void James's death had left behind. News of the arrests spread through the family like wildfire. My phone, silent for months except for harassment, suddenly exploded with messages and calls. James's cousins, aunts, uncles, people who had frozen me out based on Stephanie's stories were now reaching out, some apologetic, others simply curious about the drama. I responded selectively, keeping my comments minimal and factual. Yes, they broke into my home. Yes, I have video evidence. No, I don't want to discuss the details. Helen called with updates throughout the following days. Richard had indeed offered to cooperate with prosecutors in exchange for reduced charges. He was providing detailed information about Stephanie's campaign against me, the faked emails and messages, the coordinated harassment, even how they had accessed my accounts by guessing security questions based on information they knew as family. He's throwing her under the bus, Helen explained during one call. Claims most of it was her idea, that he just went along because she was so distraught about the cabin. The prosecutor isn't entirely buying it. The video clearly shows him planting the forged letters, but his cooperation will likely mean a lighter sentence. 3 days after the arrests, I received a call from an unexpected source. Barbara, my mother-in-law. Her voice was tentative, nothing like the cold tone from our last conversation. Megan, can we talk? We arranged to meet at a neutral location, a quiet restaurant halfway between our homes. I arrived early, choosing a corner table that offered privacy. When Barbara and Robert entered, I barely recognized them. Both looked years older, with dark circles under their eyes and a heaviness to their movements that spoke of profound distress. They sat across from me, neither immediately speaking. Finally, Barbara reached across the table, her hand stopping short of touching mine. "We saw the video," she said, her voice breaking. "Michael showed us. All of it?" I asked. Robert nodded. "Enough to know we've been horrible to you, based on lies." His eyes, so like James's, were red-rimmed. "There's no excuse for how we've treated you, Megan." "You believed what Stephanie told you," I said, not as absolution but as acknowledgement. "Because we wanted to," Barbara admitted. "After losing James, the thought of losing the cabin too, all those memories. It was easier to believe you were somehow at fault than to accept that James had made that choice. He loved that cabin," I said softly. "But he loved me more. He wanted me to have it because it meant so much to both of us." "We know that now," Robert said. Looking back, it was obvious. The way he included you in every family tradition there, how he always talked about your future plans for the place. We just couldn't see it through our grief. The conversation continued, painful but necessary. They asked about the harassment I had endured, genuinely horrified to learn the extent of what Stephanie and Richard had done. Barbara wept when I showed her the torn wedding photo. "How do we move forward from this?" she asked eventually. "Can you ever forgive us?" I had asked myself the same question countless times while lying awake at night. Could I forgive them for believing the worst of me? For abandoning me when I needed family most? "I don't know," I answered honestly. "I want to, for James's sake. But a lot of damage has been done." "We understand," Robert said, his voice heavy with regret. "We failed you, and we failed James. Whatever happens with Stephanie and Richard, we want to try to rebuild our relationship with you, if you'll let us." We parted with a tentative plan to meet again the following week. No hugs, no complete reconciliation, just a fragile beginning. That evening, Detective Rivera called with an update that left me reeling. "Mrs. Miller, I wanted to inform you that Richard Foster has provided a sworn statement detailing the harassment campaign against you. According to his testimony, the plot began almost immediately after your husband's will was read." "I'm not surprised," I said. "There's more," she continued. "He claims that Stephanie accessed your accounts using information from your brother-in-law, Michael, who provided her with dates and personal details you had shared with him." The accusation hit like a slap. "That can't be right. Michael just apologized to me. He's been trying to make amends." "We're investigating all claims," Detective Rivera said carefully. "But Mr. Foster was quite specific about Mr. Wagner's involvement in the early stages, before he allegedly had second thoughts." After ending the call, I sat in stunned silence. Had Michael's apology been genuine, or merely an attempt to distance himself once he realized Stephanie and Richard were facing serious charges? Had he been part of the conspiracy from the beginning? My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I opened it to find a message from Richard. "Ask Michael about accessing your email in January. Stephanie's not going down alone for this." I blocked the number immediately, sick to my stomach. The division within the family was complete. Richard was turning on everyone in his desperation to minimize his own culpability. The following day brought news that confirmed the final fracturing of what had once been my family. Helen called to inform me that Richard had agreed to testify against Stephanie in exchange for a plea deal on lesser charges. He's provided emails, text messages, recordings of conversations, everything they did to harass you, Helen explained. He claims he tried to talk Stephanie out of the more extreme actions, but went along to support her. And she's denying it? I asked. Completely. Her attorney is painting her as a grieving sister, manipulated by her opportunistic husband. They filed for divorce, and she's claiming Richard orchestrated everything out of greed for the cabin's value. The couple who had once seemed so united, who had stood together at my wedding, who had spent Christmases and birthdays and countless ordinary days as part of my extended family, were now destroying each other to save themselves. When we ended the call, I walked to my bedroom closet and pulled out the box I had been avoiding for months, James's personal items that I hadn't been able to sort through after his death. Inside was a hand-carved wooden box he had kept on his nightstand. It contained cufflinks, his watch, and a small leather journal I had never read, respecting his privacy even after death. That night, curled in what had once been our bed, I opened the journal for the first time. The final entry, dated just a week before his accident, broke my heart anew. Asked R to review the will changes today. Told him I want Megan to have the cabin outright. He seemed surprised but supportive. I know Steph won't be happy, but Megan is my future, my family. The cabin is where we'll raise our children someday, where our family will grow. No place has ever made her smile quite like it does when we're there together. It's where she belongs. Tears blurred my vision as I closed the journal, holding it against my chest. James had known his decision might upset his sister, but he had been so certain of his choice, so clear about our future together. A future now irrevocably altered, a family splintered beyond recognition. 6 months after the break-in, I stood on the dock at the lake cabin, watching the sunset paint the water in shades of orange and gold. The criminal case had concluded with a whimper rather than a bang, Stephanie accepting a plea deal for probation and community service after her lawyer realized how damning the evidence against her was. Richard received lesser charges in exchange for his cooperation, though his legal career was effectively over. Their divorce had been finalized the previous month, a bitter end to what had once seemed a solid marriage. I took no pleasure in their mutual destruction, feeling only a profound sadness at how greed and resentment had corroded what once was love. Michael and I had several difficult conversations after Richard's allegations came to light. He eventually admitted to sharing some of my personal information with Stephanie early on: birth dates, my mother's maiden name, the kinds of details that might help guess password recovery questions. He claimed he never realized how she would use that information, that he thought she was just trying to find contact information for some of James's old friends. Whether I fully believed him remained uncertain, but I had chosen to cautiously accept his efforts to make amends. Life was too short to nurture endless suspicion, though I would never again be as trusting as I once was. My relationship with James's parents had slowly begun to heal. We met monthly for dinner, carefully avoiding contentious topics, focusing instead on sharing memories of James and rebuilding a fragile connection. Barbara had tearfully returned the torn photograph, which she had retrieved from my trash and taped back together, an imperfect repair for an imperfect reconciliation. As for the cabin that had caused so much conflict, I had made a decision that brought me peace. With Helen's help, I established a trust that maintained my ownership of the property during my lifetime, but ensured it would eventually pass to any children I might have, or, in their absence, to James's nieces and nephews. I also created formal guidelines allowing family members visiting privileges, though Stephanie was explicitly excluded by the restraining order that remained in effect. Today marked my first gathering at the cabin since James's death. A small group including Michael and his wife Laura, their daughter Emma, James's cousin Daniel, who had steadfastly supported me throughout the ordeal, and my friend Laura, who had finally seen through Stephanie's fabrications and reached out with a heartfelt apology. I had spent the morning placing fresh flowers beside the framed photo of James on the mantel, running my fingers along the furniture he had helped restore, feeling his presence in every corner of this place he had loved so deeply. "Aunt Megan," Emma called, running down to the dock. At 7, she had the same infectious enthusiasm that had drawn me to James when we first met. "Dad says dinner's ready." I smiled, taking her small hand in mine as we walked back to the cabin. Inside, the others were setting the table, the familiar routine of a family meal continuing despite all that had changed. As we gathered around the table, I looked at these people who had chosen to remain in my life, who had weathered the storm of betrayal and loss alongside me. They weren't the family I had expected to have at this point in my life, but they were family nonetheless. Some by marriage, some by choice, all by commitment to moving forward rather than dwelling in bitterness. "I'd like to make a toast," I said, raising my glass. "To James, who knew the value of this place and what it could mean for all of us, and to new beginnings, however unexpected they may be." Later that evening, after the others had gone to bed, I sat alone on the porch swing James and I had installed during our first summer as a married couple. The security cameras I had discreetly installed around the cabin perimeter offered reassurance without dominating the peaceful setting. Trust was a luxury I could no longer afford completely, but I refused to let fear rule my life. The past 18 months had taught me painful lessons about family, about greed, about the facades people maintain. I had learned that inheritance disputes can reveal the worst in people who once claimed to love each other. I had discovered my own strength, my capacity to stand alone when necessary. Most importantly, I had learned that family isn't always defined by blood or marriage certificates. Sometimes family is created in the aftermath of betrayal, built from the people who remain when the storm has passed. As the moon rose over the lake, I felt James's presence beside me on the swing, a comforting phantom. "I kept it safe," I whispered to the night air, "just like you wanted." The cabin would always carry the shadows of what had happened, but it also held decades of joyful memories and the promise of new ones to come. Just as I was more than a widow, more than a victim of betrayal, this place was more than the object of a family's destruction. It was a sanctuary, a connection to the past, and now, finally, a bridge to whatever future awaited me. What would you do if family members betrayed your trust over an inheritance? Would you try to rebuild those relationships, or would you cut ties completely? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell to hear more stories of family drama and healing. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, sometimes the family we choose is stronger than the family we're born into.